Well, good afternoon F11 members, and welcome to the second video post-production tutorial embedded in issue 15. And this time what I'd like to do is go into Photoshop and start working through the fundamentals of what we can do with our pictures here. Now, the bottom line is, as with all my post-production, I believe the less you do the better. And we try really hard to get things right in camera so that really we're doing as little as possible in both Lightroom and Photoshop. And many people would say that if you've got Lightroom you don't need Photoshop, and in many cases that's true. Nevertheless, there are some things you can do in Photoshop that can't be done in Lightroom or other similar programs. And I'd like to show you a few of those techniques here. The thing to remember is Photoshop is a very complex program, and it's one designed not just for photographers but for designers and all sorts. And the thing is, most of the capabilities in Photoshop I very rarely use. I don't consider myself to be a Photoshop guru, but I'll use it when I have a specific need to tackle some particular problem. So this picture you'll recognize from a previous video post-production, and I've brought it into Photoshop, and what I'm going to do now is, having opened up the image, is just fine-tune a few of the local area adjustments. Now that's the big difference between Lightroom and Photoshop. Everything we do in Lightroom is essentially adjustments applied to the whole image, whereas here in Photoshop we can be much more refined. If I go up here, just look at this, we have, if I come here to size, we have this tells me what I've got here. It's full size image, it's 120 megabytes because it's 16-bit. That's the pixel dimensions which have been determined by the camera, and I've saved it as a 16-bit TIFF 300 pixels per inch, which is pretty much a standard resolution. So as is, I've thrown away none of the information as yet. So that's the picture, and if I zoom in, which I can do very easily, you'll see the actual quality of the image is really quite significant. I can do that here on this navigating tool as well. I click in there, up and down, to get the image full screen, or actually I prefer to have a little bit of working area around the edge. Now before I do anything, what I'm going to do is make what's called a layer. You see up here it says duplicate layer. So I'm just going to click on that, and it asks me what I want to do, and I'm just going to back copy. This is the background, and I'm going to make a copy of that layer. Okay, now if I look up here, I've got two layers, and at the moment both layers are identical. If I click the eye off, I'm making that layer visible or invisible by clicking on the eye. As both layers are at the moment identical, the visible effect of doing that. So why have I done this? Well, essentially it's because what I'm going to do now is make some adjustments to this image. But really I don't want to do that to the background copy. What I've done is make this top layer here, and I'm going to make adjustments to that, so that if it all goes horribly wrong, I can just go back to the background copy, which hasn't been touched at all, and there's been no adjustments being made, because all adjustments are essentially at this stage now throwing away information. So really the less adjustments we do, the better. So that's what's called a background copy layer, or you could call it adjustment layer. And I should add, there are very many ways of doing this. It's the same. Next thing I'm going to do is look at the image and don't just start playing with an image, look at it and think what needs doing. And at the moment I'm quite happy with the image, but I think what would be beneficial is for the sky to be a bit darker, and for this area here a little bit brought out there, the trees in the foreground. So I go up here to this tool here, and if I hover my cursor over it, it's not going to do it now, but that is the lasso tool, and if I click on that, and I'm now just going to select very roughly the area I want to darken, which is the sky, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm not having to be that accurate with my selection. I can afford to be imprecise with it, because what I'm going to do now, I've made a selection, is now go select modify feather, and there it's asking me feather radius. Well, what am I doing here? Essentially this feather radius refers to this edge here, and it's basically making this a soft edge. How soft is determined by this radius here. If I were to go just say 10, then that edge there would basically be 10 pixels wide, quite small, a very quite defined, well-defined edge. Going completely the other way to the maximum it will let me do, 250 pixels, means it's going to be a very soft edge there, and any adjustments I make to this top half of the picture are going to be feathered over an area of 250 pixels, so they won't be too noticeable. I won't have a hard edge to my adjustments. So I go OK, and now image, adjustments, curves, and here we have the histogram that we're looking at on the camera back, and we've been looking at when we were shooting the picture, we were looking at in Lightroom. It's the same histogram, except it's not for the whole image, it's just for the area I've selected. There's the histogram, and this is the tone curve, all in one display. Now what I can do is, just by dragging the tone curve like so, I can darken that area of the picture, or I can brighten it. I can also be far more refined about that. I can actually adjust the white and black points. So if I click on this box here, show clipping, it's made it all white. Now if I bring this white point in here, you'll start to see here where those red dots are appearing. That's telling me I'm starting to lose information there. So clearly I can't go very far at all before clipping takes place. Nevertheless, I can bring the white point in a touch, click that box off, and that's what I've done. It's very, very minutely brightened the picture and enhanced the contrast. Well, I don't want to brighten that top half, I actually want to darken it, but we'll come to that in a minute. Now I'm just going to put show clipping back on, and I'm now just going to drag the dark point of the image in. Put preview back on, and now we'll see how far I can go before, over here, can you see this area here? That's telling me that I'm starting to lose information, shadow information in those areas. We're information junkies, we like to hold on to as much as we possibly can. So that's about as far as I can go without losing any shadow information. The reason it's showing up here is because this edge is feathered. You can see that feathering taking place across this area of the image. So if I just click off the clipping indication and now preview what I've done, and you'll see that the actual contrast of that top half of the image has been enhanced. It looks a little less muddy, it looks a bit more lively. The black point, the darkest points are black, the brightest points are white. It's the same adjustment we made in Lightroom to the whole image, but now applied just to our selected area. Now at this point I can say, well, I want that sky, that top sort of third of the picture, to look just a touch darker. So I'm just going to bring this white point down a bit there. Sorry, the midpoint of the curve just to the right a touch. And now I'll click on and off to see the effect it's having. And actually I'm not so keen on it. So I'm going to go back there, keep that midpoint where it was. I think the white and dark point adjustments we've made have been good. So I'm going to click on that, go select, deselect, and now I'm just going to select this area here, just at the top of the frame. Okay, and again select, modify, feather 250, okay. Now I just go image adjustments, curves, and again I can just darken that top bit of the image a touch just by dragging that down. But I can also adjust black and white points. Now you've got to always be a bit careful with this, because if you go too far it just all looks totally horrible, you know. But just by bringing the black point in a touch and the white point, you can see I've added a lot where we started. That sky was pretty gutless. There's no great information up there, so it's never going to be that dramatic. But nevertheless, I think that density at the top of the picture holds the image in. Maybe it's a bit over the top, so I'll just scale it back a touch, preview it on and off, and I'm happy with that. I'll go select, deselect, and now I'm going to look at the bottom of the image, do the same lasso tool, and I'm essentially going to roughly select an area which equates to the darkest bit of the image. Select that, go. Now actually down here I have what these are called actions, and I'll show you in another tutorial how to do them. But if they're things that you often do, you can build these actions so that you can make a feathered selection just over with just one click of the mouse. So I'll go like that. That's feathered the selection. And now I go image, adjustments, curves, and I have the option here to adjust the white point again, which will have the effect of brightening the image. So if I brew that in here, how far can we go before I start losing information? Quite a long way before I just start to see a few little warnings appear down here. I'm going to pull it back, just have a look at my preview there. And you can see that's really quite radical. I think it's too much, quite frankly. It's always better to be subtle with these things. So I'm just going to do that much. And it just brightens up that foreground a touch. Be aware, always be aware that you cannot at this stage put in information that's not there. So if I've not got my exposure right in camera, there's nothing I can do to put in detail here in the dark area of the image. All I'm doing is essentially increasing the levels to make it appear a touch brighter. Nevertheless, if I go back to where we started, and you see the difference, the image is subtly enhanced, and really when I'm stood by the tripod, these are the kind of decisions I'm basically thinking about doing. If I've got the information there, if I've exposed properly, if I've used filters correctly, I have the capability to do this to the image subsequently. But beware, go too far, colors can look too over the top, and the picture starts to look pretty gruesome. Okay, that's as far as I want to take it at the moment. We'll leave it there and come back to to various things I do in Photoshop now. We've still got 2 layers here, but in terms of making basic local adjustments, hopefully that's useful information for you. Thank you.